Now, Ghana has a new vice president, Kwesi Bekwai Amissah Arthur, who has just been sworn into office by Parliament. Earlier today, he was grilled by members of the Appointments Committee, an exercise that has largely attracted criticism as a mere rubber stamp. Tonight, we'll do a post-mortem analysis of his vetting, approval and subsequent swearing-in. You can join the discussion with your thoughts and suggestions to 1760. Post them on our Facebook portals, facebook.com/multitvghana, or on any of our platforms. Tonight I have with me in the studio Professor Christopher Amissah, who is MP for Techiman North. Earlier we were expecting to have Rashid Pelpo of WA Central in the studio, but he is not able to make it. Welcome, sir, to the studio.
Thank you very much.
You asked a question yourself at today's vetting. Would you say you liked the answer? You were satisfied with the answer to your question?
There were two sets. One set dealt with the CV.
Yeah.
And there were some clarifications which I sought. And I think he did provide satisfactory answers.
I mean, the fact that a T was missing and the wife was responsible, that was on the lighter side. But generally, you were satisfied with the answers he gave on the CV.
Plus, if you detected the way I started it, from experience, normally during such encounters, you need an initial phase where you should get the candidate, you should get him or her to relax. So I started with this joke about him at the saddle. And of course the missing T was also a joke, but the more serious aspect dealt with dual presence, multiple presence, you may call it, here in Ghana at the University of Ghana, in one of the universities in Nigeria about the same time. And the second was while a lecturer, he was also a special assistant to the then Minister of Finance about the same time. And he did clarify that in those days, all those who were on secondment to help the PNDC remained on university salary. And that was the explanation that I got. But the second one, which was a more serious one, affecting a number of people, had to do with a microfinancing company called Onward Financial Investment. It's quite serious because they lured a number of people to the bank. They had deposits with the promise that they were going to be giving, I think, some 30%, that was the rate. So they put money in there. And a few months later, the Bank of Ghana closed down the bank, so my folks were stranded. It has taken a while. This is since the beginning of this year. That was a bit worrying. And again, he said bluntly that what that organization was doing was illegal. Unfortunately, the matter is in court, so we couldn't push it further. So on the whole, for my questions, I was happy with the answer.
So would you say things are back to normal again from the time the late President Mills, may he so rest in peace, passed away, and then the transition processes, and then his nomination? How would you rate the whole process of transition from the time President Mills passed on?
I think the transition has been excellent. Well, for all Ghanaians, actually. This is the first time that we've lost our president while he was in office. And it took us just about a day for us to have the vice president sworn in. And we followed that, working with the Constitution, Article 2010, We followed that with the process of getting Parliament to approve the president's nomination. So all of this is new to all of us, and we are happy with the way it went. No rancor. This morning when we began, many people had apprehension as to whether we were in fact going to be serious with the process. Some even questioned whether the process was necessary. But we felt that working with the Constitution, it was necessary.
Right, you're watching PM Express. We'll show you a clip of proceedings during the vetting today.
Country. There are publications in newspapers, on the internet, about your sexuality. I do not seek to make any judgment. Whether true or not, I do not know. I think if you wish to comment on those allegations and the speculations that are going on, this is a good opportunity for you.
It's been going on for about 6 months, and my lawyers were going to, they never mentioned my name, but they'll say that somebody went to transfer his son in a bank and so on, and so they could not tackle that. I'll just make one general comment. It is not true. It's absolutely not true. I have not seen this gentleman for 40-something years. Saw him once for about 2 minutes, came to my house to ask for money, and I gave him a little money, and I haven't seen him since, I'm saying that since I left in France, I've seen him once for 5 minutes. So it absolutely cannot be true of the claims that are being made. It was my children were the ones who first drew my attention to the fact that we never lived in a house with a garage. We never lived in a house with a garage. We lived in Legon, in Aido Valley. If the people who know the flats in Aido Valley, there was no garage. In the house that I lived in Northridge, there was no garage. So to say that I had an affair in a garage was not true.
Well, those are excerpts of today's vetting proceedings in Parliament, and you heard Mr. Kwesi Amissah defending himself against spurious allegations against his person. There were allegations in the media suggesting that he was gay, and he expressly stated that this was not true. Professor, you heard this explanation. Would you say it was something that should have come before the Appointments Committee at all? I mean, why would an MP raise a question critiquing or questioning the sexuality of a vice presidential nominee?
Most of us on the committee normally wouldn't go into personal lives of people. We have come to the conclusion that that is not why the committee was set up. Plus, personal lives should be private. However, there are occasions when, as a public officer, you fail to have a private life. Personally, and I've known Mr. Amissah for some time, I was in a way happy that that matter came up, for him to publicly explain his position. In fact, in this matter, he denied and gave some background about brief interactions he's had with this gentleman. I'm saying it is good he did that, because otherwise the public will continue to talk about this and pour him. He may not have an opportunity.
What would have been the position of the Appointments Committee if Amissah actually confirmed that he was gay? What would have been the position of the committee? This is a very tricky one, right?
I don't think being gay is a qualification for being vice president.
So it will not have disqualified him for the position of vice president, considering that that is against the laws of Ghana, really, for people to practice heterosexual relationships.
Well, in this case, he said no, so...
Right. So we'll not speculate on
No,
that.
we
I
won't
have on the
speculate
line
on
Professor Kwesi Prempeh, who is a constitutional analyst, joining us on the discussion. Good evening, sir, and thanks for your time.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Great. Did you watch the vetting procedures in Parliament for Vice President Kwesi Amissah?
Not for the duration. I picked up a few shots of it here and there in the course of my busy day.
So, how would you rate his performance overall?
From what I saw and what I've picked up in the media the rest of the day, I think the whole process went well. I think we are beginning to evolve a certain tradition of expecting our vice presidents to manage the economic team or economic management team for the government. We had that with Vice President Mills when he was vice president to President Rawlings. And it appears that at least in the NDC government, we also had that with President John Mahama when he was vice president. So it appears that at least with NDC government, that has been a tradition. So I wasn't particularly surprised that the questions seem to have focused on his tenure in public office on the economic side. And I think even though that seemed a bit backward looking, I mean, you're looking back at his work, it is a bit relevant to the kinds of roles that vice presidents are beginning to play in our constitutional space. So I thought that in that respect, the questions focusing on his tenure in public office, which has gotten largely to do with economic management, were indeed quite appropriate. And I think his responses were actually adequate.
But there are those who say that his responses were actually too general to offer specific answers to some of the questions that were put to him. How do you react to that? Respond to that?
Well, you can only speak in generalities in these matters. I mean, what exactly was one to expect? Basically, you're asking questions that you're not trying to elicit answers to an exam question of some objective nature. And you're also really asking questions that would require a fair amount of speculation sometimes. So I think in these things, you really only get generalities from the various respondents when you are in this kind of a process, unless you have a very specific kind of concern, a very specific factual concern. If you're talking policy, and if you want to know about the policy direction and all of that, then you can usually get only generalities from this kind of process. If you have very specific concerns, a specific act or action that went wrong, or a specific conduct that you'd want to elicit, then I guess you have to pose that question more specifically. But on policy issues, I'm not particularly sure that it's unusual to get these kinds of generalities from the interviewee.
Well, Prof, for example, when the MP for Ibuakwa South, Atachia, put this question, can you tell the whole country, since you assumed the office of governor, the financial advice you proffered to government regarding the currency? Amissah's response were this: we took decisions on the monetary policy rate and did a number of things to secure the exchange rate. I mean, I beg to differ. This is very generalized, that it's not specific.
I agree.
And that it does not give us, those of us who are not at the committee sitting and watching on TV or listening on radio, to properly gauge his efficiency in the kinds of advice he gave to government during his tenure.
Right, but again, I think going back to the point I made, if you wanted to elicit very specific responses to that kind of issue, then I guess you would have focused on, if you could isolate a particular act, you said, well, on this very particular issue, what specific advice did you give government? Say, on this particular monetary policy issue, this particular thing that was going on, maybe on the free fall of the CD and stuff like that. If you wanted to elicit a particular response, then I guess you had to isolate a very particular phenomenon.
So if I understand you clearly, then the suggestion is that members of the appointment committee didn't ask specific questions. They really asked generalized questions which demanded generalized answers. Is that your position?
I'm not sure that I think they asked the questions that they posed were appropriately posed. Given again, I don't know what prior preparation and background research had gone into a number of these things. You have to understand that we have general difficulties with transparency in government. There is very little that we know. In many ways, the central bank operates like a black box to many of us. We don't know what goes inside. We don't know what kinds of meetings they have. So it's really difficult if you're the person posing questions. It's really difficult to get into that black box and come out with very specific answers, specific questions to pose. So I'm not actually faulting the members of the appointments committee either for actually asking the kinds of questions they asked. I mean, given the circumstances, it's really difficult for them to have probed any deeper than they did.
So then you wouldn't agree with those who suggest that Parliament didn't really do a good job today and they acted just as a mere rubber stamp, really?
Well, actually, my reaction to that, I come to it from a different angle. I think for me, what did not sit well with me about this process is that in a way it was a bit rushed. Because I have said over and over again that this is a precedent-setting moment. What we do this first time around sets a precedent that begins to then chart a tradition in our constitutional life. So I think we should take care in these precedent-setting moments not to short-circuit the constitutional process for the sake of convenience or appearances. In this particular instance, it appears that Parliament's constitutional duty was held hostage to a ceremonial calendar. Somehow it had been said that Parliament needed to complete this process in order for us to have a vice president sworn in before the president's funeral. I'm not particularly sure that that was necessary. I mean, we needed a president to be sworn in immediately upon the death of the president. That is constitutionally required. That we needed to do. This other one, there's no reason why the swearing in of the vice president or the approval ought to be constrained in its timetable by the funeral calendar of the late president. So that's the part of the process I do not like. I don't think that. So in a way, Parliament then, if it was a rubber stamp, if it operated as a rubber stamp, then it was forced into that position by the calendar, the funeral calendar that had been imposed upon it. That's what part of the process I do not like.
Right, Prof. I will have you hold on there and we'll take a short video and then we'll come back to the studio. We'll come back to you, sir, on the telephone line.
Sure.
Are you happy about the state of the economy?
Mr. Chairman, it's a loaded question, and I don't know where to start from. But the economy has also chalked some major successes. We have had growth, non-oil growth of over 8% per annum for the last 2 years. When you add the oil for last year, Ghana's economy grew at a fast rate. Now, there are problems with some prices, but the general price level has declined. For the first time in the history of this country, for 24 good months, inflation has been single digit. Now, it means that pensioners and people who rely on fixed income are not as worse off as they would be in a situation where inflation was in double digits.
We're discussing the historical swearing in of a new vice president for Ghana. It's the first it has happened in the history of Ghana, and this history started when the sitting president passed away, and then through constitutional provisions, a new president was sworn in whose position had to be filled. And by another constitutional provision, the new president had to nominate Kwesi Amissah, who went through 3 hours of grilling public vetting today. Back to the studio, sir. You heard Professor Kwesi Prempeh earlier making comments about the fact that he thinks the whole process was rushed. And now his suggestion, his comment was on the back of my question to him, whether he shares the view that Parliament really didn't do a great job today. What do you make of the work of the Appointments Committee up to the point that Parliament swore in the Vice President?
I think today was not very different from the previous occasions when we've had to vet people. We all recognize one major defect of the Appointments Committee. I pointed this out in my first year on it, and that is the panel is not such as be able to go into details of people's backgrounds.
To seek confirmation or otherwise?
No, in terms of expertise. I mean, here we had a candidate who is an economist in the financial sector. And therefore, if the kinds of questions which people expect to be asked were being asked by people with enough expertise, then of course you expect the answers to be deeper, because the questions themselves will be quite deep. I mean, you have a questioner who will throw a general question on the economy, for example. I mean, if I were the candidate, I could just give you some general answers on what I think the economy is doing, highlighting my successes. But the person who is an expert in the area
should be able to hit back and say,
let's look at this, let's look at that. So that's one defect. I am looking forward to the day when candidates will face select committees properly composed for specific areas. So, and again, it all goes back to the kind of system that we are running.
But why can't we do that? I mean, why can't the Vice President nominee appear before the Parliament's Select Committee on Housing, for example,
no, but actually,
or on health, for example?
The Vice Presidential candidate, I think it is appropriate that you get a collection of generalists. Yeah. That's fine, because he is going to assist the President to oversee the whole country. But I'm looking at the operations of the Appointments Committee. And again, it's because of the system that we are running. The President does not have to nominate somebody with medical expertise to be Minister of Health. We see that generally in one area, that is finance, where the person is either an economist or a finance person. So really, during vetting, people do not get the kinds of detailed answers that the public wants. Hence, the impression that, oh, it's just a rubber stamp. But I can tell you that if it were a rubber stamp, this process could have ended with the plenary right from the beginning, because approval by Parliament could have been done by a motion, a question on the floor. Do you approve of the President's nominee? But we insisted that since loans, bills, and everything that come to the House gets referred by the Speaker to the appropriate committee, they shouldn't be different from Article 2010. And so, the rubber stamping idea,
you don't share that view?
I don't share.
But what do you think Parliament could have done different to make today better? I mean, if you don't believe that today was bad, right?
You see, I'm yet to hear from you what aspects were very bad. I heard you talk to Prof, and even in our conversation, I get the impression that
it was good.
It wasn't. No, the impression from you that it was no good.
I mean, my point is that, I mean, if you ask generalized questions, like the example of the question I read, and then if you get a generalized answer, which many people will see as just general, one of those things that he comes before the committee, answers the questions, general, and then everybody say, yeah, it's fine, go away, nothing else. Nobody delves deeper, nobody asks follow-up questions. I want to believe there are experts, various experts on the committee who could have delved deeper into some of the questions that were raised.
For economists, not too many on this committee. Maybe that was a handicap. But let us also remember that each member has 2 questions. We were restricted to 2 questions.
Including the text messages. I mean, if you read a text message, that was 1 question.
That was a message, it wasn't a question. And so, but I do agree with you that probably we could have gone a little deeper into the economics. I don't claim to be an economist, so I would await that more serious questions, deeper questions were asked. But again, Mr. Amissah knew that he was talking to the Ghanaian public, to those in our villages who haven't gone beyond JHS. And therefore, a general comment on how the economy is doing may be satisfactory. That may be different from if he was facing a panel for an appointment in a university faculty. Well, of course, you have the professors there and so on. So, well, I don't think it was not unsatisfactory as you.
Yeah. So how will you rate his performance, his demeanor today in before the Parliament's appointment committee? I put the same question to Professor Prempeh.
The demeanor was, I think, excellent. It was well composed. A little ruffled with the last but 1 question on sexuality, but that was not unexpected. I mean, it came as a jolt. But as I said, personally, I feel that it was good. This matter came up. As to the depth of the answers, to some extent, I would agree with you, but again, we could have gone further.
Now, on answers of the economy, you watched the video earlier before we went on the break, and you saw how he answered questions on the economy. To you, was that satisfactory?
He was also advised to be brief. So if he has a general question, are you satisfied with how the economy is doing? I'll just say yes and no. And they say that there were challenges, but that he gave one index that the GDP growth without oil is 8+. But you see, we could have gone further. So your 14.7 or whatever is has a major contribution from oil, and that's because of the initial investment. If you're projecting into next 2 years, 3 years, the oil contribution may start going down. So if you don't push the non-oil portion further, you'll be in trouble. And some of us suspect that from next year or 2, that's precisely what we'll be going through. And then you follow with, what do you do in the circumstances? Is it services, is it manufacturing, is it agric, which don't seem to be doing well? So those areas could have been further explored, but
here we are, his vice president already. I go back onto the phone line now to Professor Kwesi Prempeh. Thanks for holding on. Now, before we went on the break, you saw the video of Mr. Amissah's responses to questions relating to the economy. How would you say he fared in answering those economic questions that were put to him, seeing that he's an economist, he is the governor of the Bank of Ghana until May, perhaps tomorrow morning, when news break at the Bank of Ghana, he might no longer be the governor. What do you make of the responses he gave to the economic questions?
Well, I think basically the question he answered back essentially the same level of generality at which the questions were posed. I think, like my colleague on the show just said, basically these questions did not seem to allow for, or even the process itself did not seem to allow for a lot of in-depth examination of specifics or very, very technocratic style kinds of questioning. These are, the Appointments Committee is an omnibus kind of general committee of generalists. It's not issue specific, and therefore when you appear before it, usually, especially when you appear in the role of a vice presidential nominee, which is a really non-specific kind of office, then I'm not surprised that we got that kind of interaction. Basically, I think that when you are in that kind of a seat, when you are in his shoes, it's safest to be general. It is really safest to stick with generalities. The onus is on the questioners to really narrow you down and pin you down to specifics. But if they don't, or if for some reason they are not capable of doing that, then of course you as the respondent, it's in your best interest to stick with generalities, and I think that's what he did. I think that what really, more than what we see on TV or what we saw on TV, is what actually went on behind the scenes or before that, by which I mean how much was put into investigating the background, investigating the various issues that would come to the fore at the committee stage, right? So a lot more investment, I think, we need to really have a process that focuses more on doing the due diligence behind the scenes than on just appearing in the public eye and posing these questions. I think what is really crucial is the amount of resources that we can put into investigations. If I remember, for example, when Vice President Nelson Rockefeller was nominated for the vice presidency in the U.S., I think before the confirmation hearings, the investigations alone into his financial dealings, into his background and the like, took about 4 months. Right? So if you have that kind of process where you have enough time and resources to invest in investigating the various aspects of the nominee's background, his eligibility, qualifications, suitability for public office and the like, and of his life as a public officer, then that is what will improve what we see on TV. But to just appear there and without adequate time or resources to expect that we really can get something more than just what we got, it's a bit asking.
So Prof, what do you think could have been done different?
I think, going back to the point I made, I don't think this process should be constrained by the calendar of a particular ceremony that we need to have. I think that's the unfortunate part of the process. I don't think we should feel compelled to have a vice president before the funeral. We already have a president. That's fine. He's nominated a vice presidential, somebody for the vice presidential slot. We could have allowed the funeral to be over and then come and do this in a very deliberative fashion. Just take some time. I don't think we should take forever, but allow enough time for the process to look credible to everybody so that people won't sit somewhere and say it was a rubber stamp. And I'm saying this because this is the first time we're going at this kind of issue. And therefore, setting precedents for the future is important. I've already heard it said that in 2004, we hurriedly had to choose a speaker in order to get a president sworn in. So that is now being cited as precedent for why this is not unusual. You see, so once you go down that road, once you begin to set precedents like that where processes are rushed, then you begin to undermine the credibility, at least in the public eye, of the process. So the only thing I would do differently is not to have tied this to any extra constitutional timetable, which is, a funeral timetable.
Thank you very much, Professor Kwesi Prempeh.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. We'll take a look at the next batch of visuals that we have of the vetting process. Stay with us.
I want to ask him what he thinks we can do as a country with the problem of graduate unemployment, because it is something that is really creating social disability. And I want to ask him, not only from government side, but what he thinks as a country we should be doing to arrest this problem of graduate unemployment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's an important observation. I think it's a very important one, because you also want the education itself to be, for people to want to have education to improve themselves. And if they find that people who have gone to school don't have jobs, you're going to then create a disincentive for people to want to have education. I think that in part, I cannot be comprehensive in the answer, but in the design of government programs and so on, we have to put the labor employment, the employment aspect in as part of the design of government programs. And I think that should help to generate some activity that will employ people.
Now, a couple of your messages. This one from Osman Shagari. He says that I wish him all the best. I wish the Vice President all the best. And Agbo Jifa writes that thanks a lot for that, but we hope for a good work and smooth running on your side. Raphael Anna says, I think the man is competent to do the job. Let us all support him. He is a good man by nature. Godwin Doe says, congratulations, Mr. Vice President. Sylvester Sobo Blay says, only the wise can dance to the management of life. Congrats. Richard Asiedu also says, we thank God for giving us a Vice President. Nana Ofroching Pious Justice Kwabena says, continue the good work of the late President and his Vice, who is now the President. Richard Asiedu again says, this is indeed unprecedented in the history of Ghana. We should all thank ourselves. Ose Balak says, Mr. Vice, congratulations. If you've come, continue the good job for Ghana. And Felix Enim Ramos says, well, I wish him the best of luck and hope he fulfills his promises. However, he's going to be a 4-month Vice President. Savali Kelvin says, all the best in office. And Bola Dale Damilola says, wish him all the best. Harry Afachawu says, we thank God for smooth swearing of the Vice President. And Moj Jones Adam says, I welcome the Vice President to his seat and pray that God gives him the heart to overcome all insults from Ghanaians. Henry Sibusiso says, good luck to him. Francis Obeng, all phobians across the length and breadth of the country are very proud of him. We love and cherish him. Wish him well. May the Almighty grant him wisdom and strength. Jerry Elikem Glyph says, Steve, for me, it's a very exhilarating moment as a Ghanaian. Democracy really tastes amazingly delicious, and we must jealously protect it. I'm happy to have witnessed this historic Monday. Okafo Henrique says, fine selection for Ghana. This contributor is from Nigeria. Fine selection for Ghana. Long live people of Ghana. Long live Nigeria. Vasti Stephanie Amuzu also writes that God bless our homeland Ghana. I'm proud to be a Ghanaian. Wishing you the very best of everything. And Amissah Kofi Datsun says, congratulations, Vice President. You are a gentleman and the God-chosen one. God lead you in all your duties to Mother Ghana. Yeah, Professor, I'll take one more video, then we'll wrap it up since we don't have a lot of time. So we'll take one more of the videos which we shot during the vetting processes.
Corruption has been a major challenge to good governance in this country. Indeed, under this government, questions still remain unanswered on whether Ghana has gotten good value for money in the construction of classrooms, in the STX deal, in the procurement of aircrafts for the military. There are still questions that people are raising whether we are getting value for money. But in all these, you find that the mode of procurement have been sole sourcing. In the last 3 years, it appears to be the preferred mode of procurement. I want to know your own views about this preference for sole sourcing as a mode of procurement.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't know whether the premise of the question is correct, that the mode is all sole sourcing. I don't know for a fact. I haven't been involved in government procurement, but I thought that there was a National Procurement Agency. Is it? No.
Public Procurement Authority, PPA.
Authority, which is responsible for allowing sole sourcing, that you go to them to argue for reasons why there must be sole sourcing, and they will grant if they will grant the authority if it's so that. But so I don't know, but I think that for good procurement practices, it is better not to rely on sole sourcing as the main mode. But there are some instances where it is necessary. In terms of security and so on, we sometimes you have to allow for that and so on. So that's what I will say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only problem is that in this country so far, about 80% of public procurement is sole sourcing. But we're still waiting for their report in Parliament.
Where are you getting your statistics from?
It is true. Have you got a report from the Public Procurement Authority? Have you got a report? 3 years, have you been given a report? But let's proceed.
Back to PM Express, and Prof, welcome back from the break. Two issues, sole sourcing and youth unemployment. Your quick reaction.
Graduate unemployment. It is a major issue. And here our Vice President did admit that he didn't have clear answer to that problem. It is a real challenge. And I believe that he will, during the injury time, assess the President for us to see beginnings of programs to engage our graduates.
What do you mean by during the injury time? You take this period of his office as injury time, 4 months as President?
The language you use on the floor of Parliament, that towards the end of a term, if you come in the last minute like this, it is an injury appointment. So I believe that they will begin to put things in place. Youth unemployment generally is a big issue. Graduate unemployment is a major issue. But you see, all of this is arising, to my mind, out of the link between industry and our institutions. Industry is not willing to put in the necessary support for us to develop our graduates. In fact, I've been in higher education before. We still have individuals going into programs without knowing whether there'll be jobs at the end of the process. And you can look at it from the other end too. If the demand is there, we can have people go into various. So we have to establish a link. And I don't think that the answer there was satisfactory. The issue on corruption and sole sourcing. I mean, here, I think my very good friend goofed a bit for a governor of the bank not to know about procurement processes, even though you are not directly in charge of it. It's not too satisfactory because if you're going to pay from the national purse for all these jobs being done,
you should know where they are coming from, or you should know how the procurement processes went.
Yeah, but he gave an answer that, well, the finance ministry that's responsible, but I beg to differ on that one. At least you should raise questions.
So quickly, what are your expectations of him? I mean, being vice president in the interim time from now till December's elections?
I think there is a extra burden on him to try and get the new president to perform in the last four and a half months. But unfortunately for him, most of this time is going to be used for campaigning. I mean, it's late in the day for you to come up.
Do you see him as a threat to the MPP?
I don't think so.
You don't never
really
think that he's a threat. So. And what about a match for MPP's running mate, Dr. Bawumia?
Oh, one-on-one, I think they've been in the same sector for some time. One as the governor, the other as a deputy governor. In terms of expertise in that area, I think Dr. Bawumia may be slightly ahead. I mean,
you say so because you're an MPP person, or you say so because you're objective?
Looking at my very good friend's CV in that area, he's been consultant for some projects and so on. And I'm comparing the two in terms of their background, their CVs. And so I think Bawumia, in terms of expertise in the area, maybe slightly ahead.
Slightly ahead. Well, quickly before we go, I'll take the last tranche of our messages. This one from Warlock Peter Clifford says, who is that? I don't know who he's referring to, whether he's referring to Mr. Amissah or my guest in the studio. And Anthony Ajay says that there is always a conspiracy theory to every constitutionally mandated process. Events in this country, but for once, we've chalked a great success, unprecedented. And Opoku Kusi Blackman Dennis also says that he has nothing good for Ghana. He is the cause of our broken economy. Governor of Bank of Ghana, who was not able to control our cedi. How can he control over 25 million people? Ghana has indeed come of age democratically, as shown today with the swearing in of a new vice president. Our democracy has also stood the test of time. This is from George Ofori Washi from Asinfosu. And then Amissah Kofi Datsun again says, congrats, Deed, you're a gentleman. AEC Brefo Kwesi says, may the good Lord grant him all the knowledge he needs to execute his role as vice president. And a couple more from Sly Popper says, I just like the eyes of our new vice president. They look quite sexy, just like Jack. I guess he's referring to J. Kufo. And then Karim Ahmed Bediako says, for one, I think PAC has disappointed Ghanaians with this stage managed show we witnessed today. It's not exactly that bad, like our panelists have said. And Richard Bansa says that Blackman, no problem. Your name Blackman explains your personality. I'll skip all that. Our wee Kobe Ken Nyako says, well, let's give the man a chance because he has 5 months, but I believe later he will come and tell us that he got only 5 months. That is the syndrome of Ghanaians. Oscar Etia says, the man is really bold and courageous. Let us all support him to do the work. God bless Mother Ghana. And Aaron York writes that I can only wish him the best of luck, though not too challenging questions were asked. I think he deserves the chance to prove himself practically. There are people who know all the theories in the world, yet can't act practically, and vice versa. Veep, congratulations. And Ganaba Jr. Ganaba says, I was very disappointed in the vetting committee. Almost asked questions that really do not have any bearing on the massive graduate unemployment problem. No one asked how he was going to use his knowledge to help this JDM government to solve issues of bread and butter. Well, this was a fruitless exercise in my candid opinion. This is from Ganaba Koforidia. And Karim Ahmed Bediako says, I'm extremely surprised that some people are describing our new vice president as a competent man. Why? Between 2001 and 2008, our currency depreciated only 38.7%, but from 2009 to 2012, under the leadership of Amissah as governor of Bank of Ghana, our currency depreciated at a staggering rate of 50%. That is just 4 years ago. So for me, his knowledge in monetary policy is suspect. And John Paul Danker says that, Ahmed, what was the description, the depreciation rate? Well, these are arguments back and forth on Facebook.